Sign or get out." Blake's voice sliced through the room like a blade. He stood at the doorway blocking the light, waving a stack of papers like they were a judge's verdict. His grin was smug, practiced, the kind of grin that only appears when a man thinks he's finally won. We were standing in the home I had built, $1 million estate, bought with my grandmother's inheritance, paid for with long nights of work and contracts I fought tooth and nail to secure. This wasn't our house. It was mine. I had chosen every stone, every beam, every flower in the garden. Blake walked in years later after the foundation was already set, and now he wanted me gone. The top page of the stack read, "Separation Agreement." Bold letters, cheap font pulled from some free legal template online. My eyes scanned the demands transfer of the house, my consulting firm, the Vermont cabin, even my grandmother's jewelry. The pearl necklace she wore at her wedding in 1951, my grandfather's Rolex, the emerald ring she used to twist nervously during Sunday church. Each piece was listed like it was just another item in a garage sale. My chest tightened. Those heirlooms weren't just valuable, they were family history. Promises passed down from one generation to the next. The fact that Blake had the audacity to reduce them to marital assets felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Before we dive into true revenge stories, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hearing from people around the world makes these stories even more powerful and reminds us how connected we all are. He slid a blue Bic pen across the table toward me. "It's simple, Cassidy. You sign and we walk away clean. Or you refuse and you're out of this house tonight. My attorney says I have every right." He said attorney like it was a magic word, like just invoking it gave him power. I knew better. I'd hired real attorneys, the kind who drafted airtight contracts, the kind who anticipated betrayal before it happened. Blake didn't know the first thing about property law, but I let him believe he did. The room was still sunlight pouring through the window onto the stack of papers, highlighting the cheap, flimsy print. My wedding ring glinted on my finger, and I thought about the day he proposed. No ring, just a promise that success was coming soon. Years later, when it never came, I bought the ring myself. Now that small circle of platinum felt less like a symbol of love and more like evidence of a lie I'd been living. "Is this really what you want?" I asked softly. Blake smirked, puffing up like he was finally in control. "I sacrificed 4 years for this marriage. I deserve half, if not more. You were too obsessed with your work. I'm the one who kept this family together. Without me, you wouldn't be standing here." I almost laughed. He called skipping job interviews and playing video games until dawn sacrifice. He called draining my accounts for gym memberships and networking lunches a contribution. But I didn't argue. I didn't need to. I picked up the pen. His eyes widened victory already flashing across his face. Slowly, deliberately, I signed each page one after another, my handwriting neat and precise like I was signing a $1 million deal. Blake leaned forward, barely able to contain his excitement, convinced he'd won. When the last page was finished, I placed the pen down. Then, without a word, I slipped my wedding ring from my finger and set it on the table next to my house keys. The sound of metal hitting wood echoed in the silence, sharp and final. For a heartbeat, Blake froze. Then he threw his head back and laughed. "See, I told you. I told you in the end you'd understand who's really in charge." I didn't answer. I picked up my purse, adjusted my blazer, and walked toward the door. Inside, my chest was steady. He didn't know it yet, but the house was never his. The trust documents were ironclad. The business remained untouchable. And the jewelry, those priceless heirlooms, would find their way back to me, sooner or later. Blake clutched the papers like a fool holding counterfeit money, mistaking them for gold. He didn't realize he'd just given me evidence. Every word, every threat, every demand was now part of a trail that would destroy him. At the doorway, I paused, my hand on the knob, and turned just enough to meet his eyes. "You didn't win, Blake," I said quietly. "You just signed your own downfall." He blinked confused, but I didn't give him the courtesy of an explanation. I stepped outside into the cool evening air, leaving him behind in the illusion of victory. My heels clicked against the stone walkway with a rhythm that felt like freedom. The fight wasn't over. It had only begun. The next morning, my phone buzzed at exactly 7:02 a.m. I hadn't slept much. Instead, I'd spent the night in a downtown hotel suite, sipping bitter coffee while replaying every detail of the night before. Blake's laughter, his smug face, the way he clutched those worthless papers like treasure. Now as the sunrise painted streaks of gold across the city, I stared at the caller ID Rachel Thornton. My attorney. My ally. The one person I trusted to dismantle Blake's fantasy. I answered on the first ring. "Morning." Her voice was brisk but tinged with amusement. "Cassidy, I hope you're sitting down. Blake's attorney just called me in a panic." I raised an eyebrow, already feeling the corner of my mouth curve. That didn't take long. Rachel chuckled. "Apparently your husband proudly showed him the agreement you signed. The poor man thought he'd scored a victory until he realized what Blake had actually done." I leaned back in the stiff hotel chair. "Let me guess. Fraud bingo." Rachel's keyboard clicked in the background. "By demanding ownership of property that's held in your trust documents he himself signed. Acknowledging that fact, Blake basically handed us proof of intent to commit fraud. On paper. In writing. With his signature." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. The trap had sprung. Rachel continued, her tone sharp as a scalpel. "Do you have any idea what Garrett, his so-called attorney, shouted at him? And I quote, 'Do you have any idea what you just let her do?'" I almost laughed out loud. The image of Blake's smug grin collapsing under his lawyer's panic was delicious. But beneath the satisfaction, a wave of something heavier rose. Anger. Not just at his stupidity, but at the insult of it all. The man who had never paid a mortgage bill, never covered a single repair, never even bought groceries without my card. This man thought he could strip me of everything my family had worked generations to build. And worse, he thought he could take my grandmother's jewelry pearls worn on her wedding day, a Rolex passed down from my grandfather, the emerald ring she guarded like a secret. Blake had once dismissed them as old trinkets. Now they were trophies he planned to parade on Jessica's arm. My grip on the phone tightened. "What's our next move? If you're still watching, comment 1, so I know you're still with me." Rachel didn't hesitate. "Document everything. Every text, every voicemail, every social media post. Men like Blake can't resist showing off when they think they're winning. His ego will do half my job for me." She was right. By the time Rachel hung up, my phone was already lighting up with notifications. Instagram, Facebook, even Twitter. Blake had posted a photo of himself in my living room, beer raised high, surrounded by his gym buddies. The caption read, "New chapter starts now. My house, my rules. Sometimes you gotta cut out the toxic to find peace. Hashtag fresh start. Hashtag my house, my rules." I snorted. My house. His rules. The irony was almost too rich. A second post popped up. He'd turned my office into a gaming cave, 3 monitors lined across my handcrafted desk, LED strips glowing against the walls. My Achievement Award State Business Council plaques, $1 million contract certificates were gone. In their place, his action figures. The caption finally making this space productive. No more corporate prison vibes. He was documenting his own downfall, and he didn't even realize it. I forwarded everything to Rachel. Within minutes she replied, "Perfect. Screenshot saved. Keep them coming." By mid-morning, my neighbor Jennifer texted me. We weren't close, but she was sharp-eyed. She'd recorded Blake on the front porch, bragging to 10 people about how I'd abandoned the marriage for spreadsheets. In the video, his voice carried down the quiet street. She chose her career over family. I gave her an ultimatum, and she just walked out. 4 years of support, and she couldn't even fight for us. Support. The man had supported himself on my bank account, my credit cards, my patience. He wouldn't know sacrifice if it slapped him across the face. As I set my phone down, another call buzzed through. Marcus Chen, my CFO. He rarely called before noon unless something urgent was happening. "The transition is complete," Marcus said without preamble. "All company accounts have been restructured. Blake's access is gone. His corporate card's been canceled. We've already flagged 17 automatic payments linked to it." 17, I echoed. BMW lease, gym membership, country club fees, wine storage, something called executive presence coaching. $400 a month for a guy to teach him how to stand straighter and talk slower. I laughed bitterly. Blake had been living off me twice over, once with household bills and again with company funds. "Document it all, Marcus," I said firmly. I want a complete audit trail. Already in progress, he replied. When we hung up, I stared at my reflection in the hotel mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't see the weary wife trying to keep a marriage alive. I saw the strategist, the woman who had built a 7-figure business from scratch, the woman Blake underestimated. He thought last night was his victory. In reality, it was the opening move in a game he wasn't equipped to play. I opened my laptop, pulling up a blank document. Across the top, I typed, "Case file Blake Wilson." Every screenshot, every bank statement, every witness account would go here. By the time I was finished, Blake wouldn't just lose the house. He'd lose the image, the lifestyle, the lie he'd been living. And when the jewelry came back, because it would come back, it wouldn't just be pearls and emeralds in my hands. It would be proof. Proof that no matter how many games he played, the truth had always belonged to me. By the time the sun slipped behind the skyline, I was ready. My phone was already set to record, tucked neatly into the inside pocket of my blazer. Missouri was a one-party consent state. Rachel had reminded me twice. Legally, all I needed was my own permission. Blake thought tonight would be his grand performance. He'd rehearsed his lines, memorized his stage directions. I intended to let him deliver every single word, while my phone captured the whole act. When I arrived at the house at exactly 7 p.m., the smell hit me first, soy sauce and something cheap, pungent, and oily. Chinese takeout, but not from the upscale restaurant we both liked. This was from the strip mall place by the highway, the one where we once found a hare in the rice and swore never to return. The dining room was staged like a scene in a low-budget play. Candles flickered on the table lights, dimmed to funeral parlor gloom. And there, carefully laid out in front of each plate, was my grandmother's Wedgwood china. Porcelain she'd carried from England in the 1950s, fragile pieces we'd used only twice in our 4-year marriage. Both times Blake had complained about hand-washing them. Tonight they were props. "Sit," he ordered, gesturing to my usual chair. He remained standing, a manila folder tucked under his arm like it contained state secrets. I sat slowly, taking in his appearance. New suit navy this time, also purchased with my credit card. Hair slicked with the expensive pomade from my bathroom drawer. Even his posture was different, shoulders squared, chin lifted like he'd practiced dominance in the mirror. Blake cleared his throat and began. "Cassidy," he said with fake gravitas, "we've grown apart. Our paths have diverged in ways neither of us could have foreseen when we said our vows." He paused dramatically, the way actors do when they're waiting for applause. "I've been doing soul-searching, therapy, working on myself, therapy." The closest he'd come to therapy was a YouTube channel about alpha male energy, but I let him continue. "I've realized our marriage has become unbalanced. You're consumed by your work, while I've shouldered everything else, the emotional labor, the household management, the sacrifices of my own dreams." I reached for my water glass, keeping my expression neutral, while inside I cataloged each lie. The man who couldn't operate a washing machine without instructions now claimed he carried the household. The man who called business classes a scam claimed to have sacrificed his career. He slid the manila folder across the table. "I've had papers drawn up that I believe are fair to both of us." I opened it. The first page looked like it had been downloaded from a legal template site and filled in with half-baked interpretations of property law. He was demanding the house, citing contributions to its maintenance. He wanted alimony, claiming he'd put his career on hold. He even listed Cassidy Blackwood Consulting as a marital asset, writing that he'd served as unofficial consultant throughout its growth. I turned another page, and there it was, my grandmother's jewelry, labeled as marital gifts, the pearl necklace, the Rolex, the emerald ring. Even the diamond tennis bracelet Blake once told me had been lost at the golf course. All of it demanded on paper. He leaned closer, voice thick with arrogance. "This is what's fair, Cassidy. What we built together should be divided equally." I looked up at him, letting the silence stretch. He mistook it for hesitation. His chest swelled with confidence, convinced he was winning. "You want the house?" I asked finally. "I deserve the house," he said firmly. "I've made it a home while you treated it like a hotel. And the business that was built during our marriage, community property, the cabin in Vermont joint recreational property, The jewelry gifts. Hours to divide. His lies spilled out faster, more confidently, like a man rehearsing lines he thought could become truth through repetition. I set the papers down, folded my hands, and studied him like one of my clients across a negotiation table. He shifted slightly, misinterpreting my silence as weakness. Finally, he slammed his palm on the table, rattling the porcelain. "Are you going to sign or not?" I picked up the pen he'd placed beside the folder, a cheap ballpoint, and rolled it between my fingers. He stepped back, anticipating victory. His phone was already out, thumb hovering, as if ready to text his gym buddies the good news. "No," I said calmly, setting the pen back down. The color drained from his face. "What do you mean, no?" "You have to sign." "I don't have to do anything," I replied evenly. "Especially not sign fraudulent documents that wouldn't hold up in a county courthouse for 5 minutes. His composure cracked. "My attorney says your attorney advertises on bus benches, Blake." For a moment his mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Then his jaw clenched and his voice dropped into what he probably thought was menacing. "You're going to sign these papers. Voluntarily or the hard way?" "The hard way," I asked, tilting my head. "What exactly does that mean?" He straightened, pointing toward the door. "Sign the papers or get out. This is my house now. I've established residency. I've contributed to its maintenance. I have rights." The words hung in the air like smoke. Exactly as Rachel predicted, he'd just rattled off the coached script, not realizing every line was being recorded. Each phrase, each false claim, each threat, evidence. I leaned back, my expression unreadable. "Thank you for clarifying," I said softly. He mistook it for retreat. He didn't know he'd just cemented his own downfall. Blake thought he'd won. By the time I slipped out of the house that night, he was already strutting around like a conquering hero. My phone buzzed before I even made it back to the hotel. Instagram notification. Blake Wilson posted a photo. The picture stopped me cold. There he was in my living room, beer raised high, surrounded by a half circle of his gym buddies. My furniture, my hardwood floors, my home, suddenly reduced to the backdrop of his cheap celebration. The caption read, "New chapter starts now. My house, my rules. Sometimes you gotta cut out the toxic to find peace. Hashtag fresh start. Hashtag my house, my rules. Hashtag leveling up." I almost laughed. My house. His rules. The hashtags read like the punchline to a bad joke. What he didn't realize was that every photo, every careless caption was evidence that he knew exactly what he was doing, that he intended to claim property he'd never owned. Another buzz. This time a story update, a wide pan of my home office, now stripped of professionalism and turned into a gamer's paradise. 3 oversized monitors perched on my handcrafted desk, neon LED lights flickering along walls that used to hold my framed awards. His plastic action figures lined up where my achievements had once been displayed. The caption, "Finally making this space productive. No more corporate prison vibes." Productive. That word coming from Blake, a man whose greatest accomplishment in 4 years was completing level 10 of some video game. I forwarded the screenshots to Rachel. Her reply came within seconds. "Perfect. Save everything. He's documenting intent to defraud." By the time I checked into my hotel, the victory party was in full swing. My neighbor Jennifer texted me a shaky video from her kitchen window. She whispered as she recorded her voice tinged with disbelief. "He's got 10 people over Cassidy, giving them a tour, telling everyone you abandoned the marriage." The video showed Blake on my porch puffing his chest out like a proud homeowner. His voice carried across the quiet cul-de-sac. She chose spreadsheets over family. I gave her an ultimatum and she just walked out. Can you believe that 4 years of supporting her ambition and she couldn't even fight for us? I gritted my teeth. Supporting me? The man couldn't support himself without my credit card. Another ding this time from Marcus Chen, my CFO. His voice was calm, professional, but I could hear the undercurrent of irritation as he explained. The corporate card's been terminated as of 8:47 p.m. Blake already tried using it at a bar called Velocity. Declined, twice, then again at a liquor store. Declined. Pizza delivery. Declined. I almost smiled. Keep documenting. Already building the audit trail, Marcus replied. One by one, Blake's financial lifelines were snapping. He just didn't know it yet. By 11 p.m., his social media feed looked like a teenager's brag reel. Photos of him clinking beer bottles with his buddies. A selfie of him sprawled across my leather couch captioned, "Finally free." A shot of my wine cellar, an $800 bottle of Chateau Margaux poured into red Solo cups like it was boxed wine. Rachel's text came through sharp. He just broadcast himself destroying separate property assets. This is gold. But it wasn't just gold. It was infuriating. That wine collection wasn't just expensive. It was carefully curated investment grade. He hadn't earned a single drop of it yet. There he was, wasting it on people who couldn't tell the difference between vintage Bordeaux and grocery store Merlot. Near midnight, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Sarah, my younger sister. Her voice was tight with anger. "Cassidy, he just called me. Said you had some kind of breakdown. Told me you abandoned your marriage to chase money. He asked me to encourage you to seek therapy." I shut my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. "He's spinning the narrative." "Spinning," she snapped. "He's flat out lying. He even used words Blake doesn't know, emotional labor, relationship equity." He sounded coached. Of course he did. His bargain bin attorney must have handed him a script. Blake was just parroting the lines. Sarah's voice softened. "Do you want me to come get anything from the house jewelry papers before he trashes them?" "Not yet," I told her. "Let him think he's winning. The more comfortable he feels, the more mistakes he'll make." She didn't sound convinced, but she trusted me enough to let it go. When the call ended, I opened my laptop at the hotel desk. One by one, I dropped every screenshot, every text, every video into a folder titled Exhibit A, the Party. I paused on Jennifer's video, playing it again. Blake's voice rang out cocky and careless. She chose spreadsheets over family. I gave her an ultimatum, and she walked out. He had no idea those words would echo in a courtroom someday. Outside, the city was quiet. In my suite, the only sounds were the hum of the air conditioner and the buzz of incoming notifications as Blake continued to document his own downfall in real time. I leaned back in my chair, exhaustion pressing at my bones, but a steady calm sat underneath it all. Let him drink. Let him gloat. Let him parade around my house with his hashtags and his cheap victories. The more he bragged, the deeper he dug his own grave. And tomorrow, when the hangover hit, when the calls from the BMW dealership, the country club, and the gym started rolling in, reality would catch up with him. Until then, I would watch record and wait. Because patience was power. And I'd spent 4 years perfecting it. The morning after Blake's so-called victory party, I thought I'd wake up hollow. Instead, I woke up sharp, clear. At 5:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Emma, my assistant of 3 years. She never texted before 7 unless something was seriously wrong. "Can we meet before the office opens? There's something I should have told you months ago." My stomach tightened. I showered quickly, dressed in black slacks and a crisp blouse, and met her at a coffee shop 3 blocks from my office. Emma was already there, nervously shredding a napkin into tiny strips. She looked up, guilt etched across her face. "Cassidy, I saw him. Months ago, at the Marriott. You were on stage giving your keynote, and I'd stepped out to handle the Chicago contract emergency. Blake was there, with a woman." The napkin strips fluttered to the table like confetti. "Describe her," I said, steady but cold. Early 20s, blonde, fit. She looked expensive. The word cut. Expensive. That's how Blake saw women like acquisitions. Emma hesitated, then pulled out her phone. I didn't want to believe it, but last week I saw this. She handed me her screen. Instagram. Jessica Reeves, fitness influencer. My pulse hammered as I scrolled through her feed. There she was, Jessica posing at a gym mirror, wearing my Cartier watch, the one Blake swore had been misplaced during our anniversary trip. In another shot, she was flexing diamond tennis bracelets sparkling on her wrist, my bracelet. Blake had told me it had fallen off during one of his golf outings. But the photo that broke something deep inside me was a selfie of Jessica blowing a kiss at the camera, a string of pearls gleaming around her neck. Not just any pearls, my grandmother's wedding pearls gifted in 1951. My throat went dry. Blake hadn't lost them. He hadn't sent them for cleaning. He'd given them away. "Emma," I whispered, "thank you. You did the right thing telling me now." But inside, rage clawed through me. He wasn't just stealing money. He was pawning off my family's legacy piece by piece to impress a woman who probably thought he was some self-made mogul. That afternoon, Rachel confirmed what my gut already knew. My forensic accountant found a separate account, she explained over the phone. Papers rustled in the background. 4 months old, registered only in Blake's name, $37,000 in structured cash deposits, classic concealment. The timing matched perfectly with the jewelry and antiques that had quietly disappeared from my home and storage unit. My father's Hemingway collection, my grandmother's silver tea set. He'd been liquidating heirlooms to build himself an escape fund. The betrayal wasn't just financial anymore, it was generational theft. He was stealing the stories, the history, the blood and sweat of the people who came before me. Still, I needed proof solid enough to bury him. Proof no lawyer could spin. That's when I knocked on Mrs. Chin's door. At 73, she was sharper than most CEOs I'd worked with. She opened the door before I could even ring twice. "I wondered when you'd come," she said, leading me into her dining room. Her laptop sat open on the polished mahogany table. She turned the screen toward me. "My grandson set up cameras after those package thefts. They catch everything." She clicked play. The timestamp read 2 weeks ago. Blake's BMW pulled into my driveway. He hopped out, then opened the passenger door. Jessica stepped out laughing. His hand pressed low on her back like they'd done this routine many times before. He guided her to my front door. With my key, I gripped the table so hard my knuckles whitened. "There's more," Mrs. Chin said softly. She played another clip, this one from last month. Jessica arriving alone, unlocking my door, walking inside like she owned it. She stayed 3 hours. The final video made my stomach twist. My boxes being carried from the house to Blake's car. Family heirlooms, books, antiques. My life loaded up like clearance sale merchandise. "I should have told you sooner," Mrs. Chin murmured, eyes full of regret. But I wasn't sure if it was my place. I didn't want to interfere in marital matters. "You did the right thing," I said, though my voice cracked. When I left her house, I felt heavier and lighter at the same time. He wasn't just plotting to take my house. He'd already been robbing it from the inside out, brick by brick, heirloom by heirloom, and he thought no one would notice. But now I had him on camera. I emailed the files to Rachel immediately. Her reply came 10 minutes later. "This changes everything. He's not just a con man, he's a thief, and now we can prove it." That night alone in my hotel suite, I opened a box I'd carried with me for years. Inside was a single photograph, my grandmother wearing those pearls on her wedding day, smiling as though she'd known they'd last through generations. I pressed the photo flat against my desk and swore one thing: Blake would never steal her legacy again. Not while I was still breathing. The cracks began the morning after Blake's victory party. At 8:47 a.m., Marcus, my CFO, called with his usual calm precision. "Cassidy, all automatic payments tied to Blake have been suspended. His BMW leased gym membership country club, dues 17 in total. He's already attempted to charge coffee and gas, all declined." I could almost picture it, Blake standing at a gas pump swiping his card again and again, disbelief tightening his face as each transaction failed. "Document everything I told Marcus. Already building the audit trail," he replied. His tone carried a quiet satisfaction, like a man watching dominoes fall exactly where they'd been placed. By mid-morning, the phone calls started. First the BMW dealership, then the country club, then a frantic voicemail from the wine storage facility. Each message was polite but firm: payments overdue, accounts suspended, repossession in progress. Jennifer, my watchful neighbor, texted me at 9:15 a.m. with a photo taken from her living room window. Blake stood in my driveway, wearing wrinkled pajamas, clutching a repossession notice in one hand, his cell phone in the other. He jabbed at the screen like a man possessed, only to realize the service had been cut off at midnight. No car, no phone, no access, no control. By 9:42 a.m., Rachel's paralegal burst into her office with fresh updates. "Mr. Wilson just tried to log into the smart home system. 5 failed attempts on the coffee maker, the blinds, the thermostat. All denied. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Blake, the self-proclaimed genius, was locked out of the very appliances he'd mocked as unnecessary toys. The house no longer recognized him as an authorized user. Then came the Instagram twist of the knife. Jessica Reeves, his shiny new conquest, posted a brunch photo with another man. Champagne glasses clinked. A Rolex glinted on her companion's wrist. Her caption read, "When the universe removes toxic people for you. #new energy. #upgrade. She'd blocked Blake, publicly, thoroughly. By 10 o'clock, his empire was in ruins. But the real blow was still to come. At 10:03 a.m., Rachel's phone lit up with an incoming call, Thomas Garrett Blake's bargain bin attorney. She put it on speaker, eyes twinkling. "Miss Thornton Garrett," began, his voice pitched higher than yesterday's smug threats. "I need clarification on the CBW Holdings Trust. My client was under the impression the property was marital asset." Papers rustled frantically in the background. Rachel's reply was cool, almost bored. "Mr. Garrett, your client signed documents acknowledging the property was held by the trust. 7 signatures to be exact, each one affirming he understood ownership." A pause. Garrett's voice strained. "There may have been some confusion about the implications of those signatures." Rachel didn't blink. Confusion. He demanded exclusive rights to trust property he knew he didn't own. "That's documentary fraud, Mr. Garrett." The typing in the background stopped. We could hear Garrett's breathing quicken, the faint sound of him covering the phone to mutter to someone in his office. Then a muffled voice came through the speaker. "Blake. Tom, what's happening?" "My car's gone. My cards don't work. I can't even make coffee in my own house." Garrett snapped back, his composure unraveling. "It's not your house, Mr. Wilson. It never was. You committed fraud. She didn't give you anything. You gave her evidence to bury you with." The silence that followed was almost sweet. Blake's breathing, shallow and panicked, filled the room. "You said possession was 9/10 of the law," he finally stammered. "I said that before I knew about the trust, before I saw your posts about turning the property into a rental, before I saw your signatures acknowledging you understood the ownership structure. You've sunk yourself." Blake Garrett's voice cracked, forgetting Rachel and I were still on the line. "Do you have any idea what you just let her do?" Rachel muted our end of the call. We sat back and listened as Blake spiraled, shouting about squatters' rights, residency laws, anything he could cling to. But even Garrett knew the truth. Blake had just handed me the rope to hang his case. When the call ended abruptly, Rachel leaned across her mahogany desk, smiling like a shark who smelled blood. "We'll serve him eviction papers tomorrow, 7 a.m. sharp." For a moment, the weight of it all settled around me. 4 years of manipulation, entitlement, and theft, and in less than 24 hours, his empire had collapsed. He thought he'd orchestrated my downfall with a folder of bogus papers. Instead, he'd signed his own confession, and tomorrow the sheriff would make sure he understood that. At 7:00 a.m., sharp, the patrol SUV eased to the curb in front of my house. The neighborhood was quiet, sprinklers ticking, a dog barking in the distance. Deputy Martinez stepped out, crisp uniform documents in hand. Jennifer, my neighbor, recorded from her kitchen window. She texted me a live clip as the deputy knocked 3 times on my front door. Blake shuffled out in wrinkled pajamas, hair sticking up like a man who'd lost control of more than his sleep. "Blake Wilson?" the deputy asked. "Yeah," Blake muttered, trying to stand taller. "You've been served." The deputy handed him the envelope. "Formal notice to vacate. You have 72 hours to remove your personal property. Do not touch anything listed as separate. Failure to comply could result in forcible removal or criminal charges." Blake's voice cracked. "You can't evict me from my house. I live here." The deputy didn't flinch. "It's not your house. It's trust property. And you acknowledged that in writing." Jennifer zoomed in as Blake's face twisted, papers shaking in his hands. For a moment, he looked like a boy caught in a lie too big to back out of. My hotel phone rang minutes later. An unknown number. Cassidy Blake's voice was ragged, desperate. "We need to talk like adults. This has gotten out of hand." "We did talk," I said evenly. "You demanded my house, my business, my grandmother's jewelry. I signed exactly what you asked me to sign. Now the law is handling the rest." "That was just negotiation," he argued, panic edging his tone. "You set me up. No, I said. I documented. He tried softening. Where am I supposed to go? My car's gone. My cards don't work. Jessica isn't even answering me. I let the silence stretch before replying. You have 72 hours. Take what's yours. Leave what isn't. His voice cracked rage flooding back. You destroyed my life. No, I corrected. I stopped paying for it. Then I hung up. By mid-morning, a U-Haul pulled into the driveway. Daniel, his brother, climbed out jaw tight. Jennifer's camera caught every moment. They carried out what little Blake could truly claim the gaming chair he loved more than me, his dumbbells boxes of self-help books that had promised him millions. Arguments broke out at the threshold. Blake insisted the Peloton was his. Daniel showed the receipt on my card. Blake reached for the wine fridge. Daniel shook his head. Every fight ended the same way with proof. Rachel called as the U-Haul ramp clanged. Notice served, and we filed the injunction for the jewelry. Between Jessica's Instagram posts and the doorbell footage, the judge won't hesitate. If needed, we'll push for a search warrant. I closed my eyes. Relief didn't feel like joy. It felt like air after weeks underwater. Good. By early afternoon, the truck looked half empty. Blake stood in the driveway, holding a lamp, like it was a crown jewel, arguing with Daniel until his voice cracked. Neighbors stopped pretending not to watch. Mrs. Chin sat on her porch with tea unbothered, while Mr. Patterson walked his beagle past 3 times, slowing each loop. The man who thought he could steal my life was reduced to bickering over a lamp. When the U-Haul disappeared around the corner, the locksmith's van rolled up. We timed it perfectly. Start with the front, I told him. Then every door. Reset the smart system, too. Metal clicked. Cylinders slid into place. Codes erased new ones set. While he worked, I moved through the house. Curtains opened for the first time in years. Sunlight spread across the floors Blake preferred in shadows. I touched the kitchen counter where my grandmother once polished silver and the closet shelf where my jewelry box should have been. The gap burned, but it wasn't permanent. Not lost. Recovering. When the locksmith handed me the new keys, they chimed together like clear bells. Earned, not heavy. I paused in the office doorway. The desk was bare, the neon glow gone. I placed a legal pad in the drawer and wrote 3 lines, complete inventory by Friday. Update witness list. Bring the pearls home. Outside, the evening turned golden. The house felt different already, lighter, like it could breathe again. Welcome back, Mrs. Chin called softly from her porch. I locked the door, turned the knob, and felt it hold for me, and only me. Sometimes reclaiming your life isn't loud. Sometimes it's a new key, turning a curtain, opening a house, remembering your name. By the time the locks clicked into place, the house finally felt mine again. But one gap still gnawed at me, my grandmother's jewelry. The pearls she wore on her wedding day, the emerald ring she polished every Christmas, the Cartier watch I'd gifted myself after my first $1 million contract. They weren't just ornaments. They were proof of survival, of legacy, of everything my family built before me. And Blake had stolen them. Rachel knew it too. We can file for an injunction, she said, flipping through a stack of affidavits. Jessica's Instagram is practically a catalog of stolen property. Add the doorbell footage and the judge will sign off before lunch. She was right. Jessica had flaunted every piece online like a spoiled child in a dress-up box. My grandmother's pearls gleamed in her gym selfie. My bracelet sparkled in a girl's night video. Even my Cartier watch, once tucked in my dresser, now sat bold on her wrist in a #blessed caption. The evidence was undeniable, but evidence wasn't enough. I needed those pieces back. 2 days later, Rachel and I sat in Judge Alvarez's chambers. Papers covered the table, neatly tabbed by her paralegal. Rachel's tone was crisp. Your Honor, exhibit. A photographic evidence from public social media accounts showing stolen heirlooms. Exhibit B, video footage of Ms. Reeves entering the property with unauthorized keys. Exhibit C, financial records linking pawn shop deposits to missing antiques. The judge adjusted her glasses, eyes narrowing on the photos. Jessica in neon gym shorts, grinning into a mirror, while my grandmother's pearls glowed under fluorescent lights. These belong to your grandmother, Judge Alvarez asked me directly. Yes, I said. My voice didn't waver. They were gifted to her on her wedding day in 1951. I wore them once at my graduation, and I will wear them again. The judge's gavel hit the block with a single decisive crack. Motion granted. Injunction approved. Property to be seized and returned pending verification. Relief flooded through me, sharp and cold like diving into lake water. It wasn't final, but it was movement. The knock came 3 mornings later. Deputy Martinez again, this time with a warrant and a second officer. They'd already been briefed on Jessica Reeves. Jennifer texted me a play-by-play as the deputies crossed Jessica's apartment threshold. 10 minutes later, Rachel called. "They've got them." Her voice carried a rare smile. The pearls, the bracelet, the watch, the emerald ring, all catalogued, all photographed. I closed my eyes, tears prickling for the first time in weeks. "Grandma, they're coming home." When the jewelry was finally placed back into my hands, I couldn't breathe for a moment. The pearls felt cooler than I remembered, heavier, like they'd absorbed the months of betrayal and returned stronger. The emerald ring caught the light exactly as it had in childhood memories when Grandma would slip it onto my finger and whisper, "One day, this will be yours." Blake had tried to erase that legacy. Jessica had paraded it like a prize, but here it was, returned intact. Rachel watched quietly as I fastened the pearls around my neck. "Justice isn't always about courtrooms," she said softly. "Sometimes it's about getting back what was already yours." I looked in the mirror. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw more than survival. I saw reclamation. That evening, Sarah came by with champagne. We sat in the kitchen, candles glowing against the polished silver tea set Blake once tried to pawn. She reached across the table, touching the pearls at my throat. "She would be so proud of you," she whispered. I nodded, my voice low but certain. "These aren't just jewels. They're proof that he couldn't rewrite the story. Not Grandma's, not Dad's, not mine." And as the bubbles rose in our glasses, I realized something simple and fierce. Blake had lost more than a house, more than money. He had lost the one thing he could never steal: my history, my inheritance, my name. Blake's fall wasn't dramatic at first. It was humiliating in pieces, like dominoes tipping one after another. It started with his BMW repossession. Word spread faster than the tow truck could pull away. By lunch, members at the country club whispered over martinis, eyebrows raised. By evening, Jennifer texted me. "He's pacing the driveway, yelling into a landline. Everyone's watching." Next came his gym, the place he treated like a stage. His key fob deactivated his membership, suspended for unpaid fees. A trainer told one of my clients he showed up, swiped 3 times, then begged the front desk. Had to leave in front of everyone. By week's end, Blake wasn't just broke, he was exposed. His social media empire crumbled in real time. The hashtags that once puffed him up, "At my house, my rules," how at Fresh Start, turned into ammunition. Screenshots circulated in private chats shared with captions like, "This guy total scam." Jessica's public breakup posts poured gasoline on the fire. She wrote about toxic men who can't even buy coffee and tagged him before blocking him. Within days, his Instagram vanished. Deleted, not deactivated. As if he thought disappearing could erase the evidence. But the screenshots lived on. LinkedIn told its own story. His consulting firm page dissolved, his profile stripped bare. "I saw the alert, Blake Wilson viewed your profile 17 times in a week, then nothing." His account went dark. But humiliation spread beyond screens. At the coffee shop down the block, the barista told Sarah he tried to pay with Apple Pay, declined. Then his backup card declined. He stormed out, muttering about lawyers. At the liquor store, Marcus reported Blake tried buying discount whiskey, only to walk out empty-handed when both cards failed. "He looked like someone unplugged his life support," Marcus said dryly. Even the restaurant where he'd once networked cut ties. The owner emailed me politely. "Mr. Wilson has an outstanding balance. Should we send statements directly to you, or has he been removed from company accounts?" I replied with 2 words. "Removed permanently." The worst hit came from Jessica. She posted one final photo at the same restaurant where Blake had proposed to me 4 years ago. Only this time she sat across from another man, champagne in hand, Blake's emerald gift still on her finger. The caption, When you know, you know. Hashtag new beginnings, #upgrade. The tag Blake Wilson was visible for exactly 5 minutes before she deleted it. Long enough for half the city to see, long enough for his humiliation to be permanent. Rachel called midweek with an update. His attorneys dropped him, she said, tone brisk. Garrett claims Blake misled him about assets. But the truth? He realized representing him meant professional suicide. Where does that leave Blake? I asked. Adrift. No counsel, no car, no cash, no credibility. And with a fraud complaint hanging over him. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered Jessica flaunting my grandmother's pearls online. I remembered Blake laughing while pushing bogus papers across the table thinking he'd won. Sympathy vanished like smoke. The collapse didn't stop at finances or reputation, it bled into family. Sarah called one night, voice tight. Daniel told me Blake's crashing on his couch. Says he spends hours ranting about you about how you tricked him. Daniel's had enough. He told Blake, "You ruined yourself, man." Jennifer's updates matched. He screams at the U-Haul parked outside like it's the truck's fault his stuff doesn't fill it. Neighbors don't even hide anymore. We stand outside and watch. It's like live theater. Even Mrs. Chin never cruel offered a sharp truth when I walked by. That man thought noise was strength. Turns out, silence yours was stronger. By the end of the month, Blake was a ghost. No car in the driveway, no gym appearances. His name whispered with pity, then with scorn. I didn't need to ruin him. He'd done it himself. All I did was shine a light on the cracks he tried to plaster over. And as much as his collapse satisfied the part of me that craved justice, it wasn't the revenge I wanted most. Because true revenge isn't just watching someone fall. It's standing tall when they can't. The first morning back in my house felt like breathing clean air after years in a smoke-filled room. The locksmith had finished the night before reprogramming every code and resetting the smart home system. When the new deadbolt clicked into place, it sounded like punctuation, a hard stop at the end of a painful sentence. I walked through each room in silence, curtains drawn wide, sunlight spilling across floors that had once felt shadowed by Blake's presence. The air was fresh again, no longer tainted by his cologne or the sour edge of protein powder tubs scattered across counters. For the first time in years, this house was truly mine. The transformation began with restoration. I unpacked the boxes I'd hidden away, the first editions of my father's Hemingway collection, my grandmother's china, the Victorian desk Blake had called clutter. Piece by piece, I reclaimed the life he'd tried to erase. The garage, once a shrine to his half-hearted fitness phases, became a library. Shelves rose floor to ceiling, filled with books that smelled of leather and possibility. A deep reading chair caught the morning light, replacing the rubber mats and iron plates. Even my office shifted back into a sanctuary. I rehung my awards, the framed first dollar from Cassidy Blackwood Consulting, and the photos of my earliest contracts. Where Blake once taped vision boards for dreams that never materialized, I restored reminders of real victories earned through work and grit. Every room whispered, "This is who you are, Cassidy," not who he pretended you were. Business thrived in his absence. Emma's shoulders seemed lighter when she walked into meetings, no longer tiptoeing around Blake's questions or invented advice. Clients who had quietly doubted my judgment for staying with him now doubled down on contracts their faith in me renewed. One longtime partner leaned across the table after signing a renewal and said, "It's good to see you free. You're sharper when you're not carrying dead weight." Even Marcus, my CFO, cracked a rare smile. "The numbers tell the truth, Cassidy. Without Blake's drain, your growth curve looks unstoppable. I wasn't just surviving, I was ascending." But the real healing came from people, not numbers. Sarah flew in from Seattle with a bottle of champagne. "Finally came to your senses," she teased, hugging me tight in the kitchen. Mrs. Chin brought dumplings too ethnic for Blake's taste, setting them proudly on the table. Jennifer Martinez, once just a polite neighbor, dropped off a casserole and a hug that lingered longer than expected. Even my mother called her voice firm but warm. "Your father would be proud, Cassidy. Not because you fought him, but because you remembered your worth." Piece by piece, community filled the cracks Blake had left. 6 months later, I hosted my first dinner party. Rachel arrived with her wife carrying wine that cost more than Blake's canceled gym membership. Emma brought lasagna in the casserole dish Blake once banned because carbs didn't fit his fitness goals. Sarah lit candles in my grandmother's crystal holders. We sat at the mahogany dining table Blake had wanted to sell for something modern. Candlelight glowed across faces I trusted, laughter rising naturally instead of forced networking chuckles. We toasted with my grandmother's crystal glasses, the ones Blake had called outdated. To Cassidy, Rachel said, raising her glass, "Proof that the best revenge isn't destroying someone else, it's protecting what was always yours and letting them destroy themselves." The words sank into me like sunlight through stained glass. I looked around at the people who mattered, colleagues, friends, family, neighbors, and realized Blake hadn't taken anything I couldn't rebuild. In fact, his betrayal had given me clarity. The house no longer carried his shadow. The library smelled of polished wood, not gym socks. The kitchen hummed with warmth, not clutter. My office gleamed with awards, not delusions. This wasn't just survival. It was reclamation. Blake had thought he was clever, staging ultimatums, rehearsing speeches, hiring bottom-shelf attorneys. But while he played pretend, I built permanence. And in the end, he didn't just lose the house. He lost the right to say he'd ever belonged in it. The first time I stood alone in my reclaimed house, silence filled every corner like a blessing. Not the heavy silence of suspicion, the kind that used to settle when Blake sulked in another room after a failed scheme. This was peace. The absence of chaos, the sound of freedom. I walked from room to room, opening blinds, pulling curtains wide, letting sunlight pour across polished floors. The house seemed to exhale with me, like it had been waiting years for its true owner to return. The journey had been brutal. Betrayal leaves scars no financial settlement can erase. I'd lost more than money or jewelry. I had lost the illusion of the man I once believed in. But as I breathed in the sunlight, I realized something profound. What remained was stronger than what had been taken. The days after Blake's eviction unfolded like a series of small liberations. No more late-night arguments over bills he never paid. No more fabricated networking events that drained my bank account. No more missing heirlooms explained away with clumsy lies. Every trace of him, his energy drinks, his gym equipment, his endless self-help books had been boxed and hauled away. In their place came restoration. My grandmother's china glistened on shelves again. My father's books filled the new library. My office walls once more bore the awards of battles I'd truly fought and won. The house had always been mine, but now it felt mine. Business thrived too. Clients who once looked at Blake with polite confusion now congratulated me on my clarity. My CFO reported record growth after cutting away the dead weight of his spending. Emma, my assistant, walked taller, no longer forced to explain away Blake's intrusive questions. Even the industry whispered the story, not as gossip, but as admiration. In boardrooms and conference calls, people leaned in and said, "Cassidy, you're an example of resilience." The irony wasn't lost on me. Blake had tried to brand me as selfish, career-obsessed, incapable of love. But his collapse revealed the opposite. I was the one who had built love into action, loyalty into contracts, stability into a home. He was only ever a spectator. But survival alone wasn't enough. Healing required more. It came in the form of community. My sister Sarah flying in champagne in hand. Mrs. Chin next door sipping tea on her porch like a sentry watching justice unfold. Jennifer Martinez, the neighbor who once waved from across the street, now a friend who dropped off casseroles when I worked late. Even my mother, cautious and weary, called with a voice that shook but steadied as she said, "Your father would be proud, Cassidy. Not for what you won, but for what you didn't lose your integrity." Integrity. That word became my anchor. 6 months later, the dinner party sealed the story's true ending. The dining table Blake had wanted to replace gleamed with candlelight. "Rachel," my attorney raised her glass in a toast, "the best revenge isn't tearing someone down. It's protecting what was always yours and letting them destroy themselves." Laughter echoed through the room. Not nervous laughter, but genuine, unforced joy. My grandmother's crystal clinked. My friends passed lasagna dumplings and wine across the table. For the first time in years, my house wasn't a stage for Blake's performances. It was a home filled with love, loyalty, and laughter. As I looked around the table, I realized Blake's greatest mistake wasn't trying to steal my assets. His mistake was underestimating me. He believed forged papers and fake speeches could outmatch preparation, discipline, and truth. But true revenge stories don't rely on destruction. They rely on patience, documentation, and a quiet strength that speaks louder than any ultimatum. Forgiveness surprised me too. Not forgiveness for Blake's actions, they were deliberate, cruel, and selfish. But forgiveness for myself, for the years I believed him, for the excuses I accepted, for the trust I gave without boundaries. That forgiveness was the final liberation. Because revenge isn't really about the other person, it's about reclaiming yourself. And I had. If you followed this story to its end, maybe you've seen pieces of yourself in it. Maybe you've faced betrayal from someone you trusted. Maybe you've lost something only to realize what mattered couldn't be stolen. Maybe you've learned, as I did, that strength isn't built in dramatic moments. It's built in every careful choice, every documented truth, every boundary drawn with quiet certainty. And maybe you're nodding because you know that sometimes the sweetest victory isn't rage or destruction. It's peace. As we close this chapter, I want to invite you, my listeners, into the conversation. What was your favorite moment in this story? Was it when Blake's lawyer screamed, "Do you have any idea what you just let her do?" Was it the image of him standing helpless in the driveway, his BMW repossessed phone disconnected, or was it the dinner party, the final scene of community and joy? Drop your answer in the comments. I love reading where these stories resonate most. And tell me, where are you watching from? Every week, I'm amazed by the voices from Maine to Manila, from Texas to Toronto, from Perth to Manchester. Your presence turns these stories into something larger than one person's revenge. It becomes a shared reminder of resilience worldwide. If this story held you to the very end, hit that like button right now. It helps us grow, reach more people, and bring you more true revenge stories that remind us all of the power of truth over lies. And if you haven't already, subscribe and join this community of survivors, listeners, and storytellers, because there are more stories coming, stories of betrayal, resilience, and justice that you won't want to miss. As I set down my glass at that dinner party, laughter echoing around me, I finally understood the truth. The best revenge wasn't Blake's collapse. The best revenge was living freely, fully, without him, surrounded by people who mattered in a house that finally felt like home. And that, my friends, is the ending Blake never saw coming.